Blackbeard, born Edward Teach, was one of history's most feared and iconic pirates, emerging in the early 18th century during the Golden Age of Piracy. He carved a legendary path through the Caribbean and American coasts. Commanding the formidable Queen Anne's Revenge, he struck terror into sailors with his fearsome appearance, wild eyes, a thick black beard, and slow-burning fuses tucked beneath his hat, smoking like a demon of the sea. Though ruthless, Blackbeard was also cunning, using intimidation as much as violence to achieve his ends. His reign was short but unforgettable, ending in a dramatic battle in the year 1718. This is his story. Little is known with certainty about Blackbeard's early life. He was likely born around the year 1680, making him between the ages of 35 and 40 at the time of his death. His real name appears in records as either Edward Thatch or Teach, Thatch being preferred by those who knew him personally. Though the Boston Newsletter, the only newspaper in colonial North America, used Teach. Like many pirates, he may have adopted an alias to protect his family, leaving his true identity uncertain. He likely grew up in Bristol, then England's second largest city, and a bustling port during the rise of the American colonies and the transatlantic slave trade. He was almost certainly literate. Historian Robert Lee speculated that he came from a respectable and possibly well-off family. He may have first arrived in the Caribbean aboard a merchant or slave ship in the late 1600s. According to the 18th century writer Charles Johnson, Blackbeard served as a privateer during the War of the Spanish Succession, a major European conflict sparked by the death of the childless King Charles II. The war became an opportunity for many seafarers, including Blackbeard, to gain wealth through sanctioned piracy. Johnson described him as a courageous and capable sailor, operating from Jamaica. Despite these glimpses, much of Blackbeard's life before turning to piracy remained lost to history. With its legacy of colonial ambition, global trade, and rampant piracy, the West Indies became a center of pirate activity during the 17th and 18th centuries. In the early 1700s, privateer-turned-pirate Henry Jennings and his crew established a base on the uninhabited island of New Providence, perfectly situated near the heavily trafficked Florida Strait. The island's harbor could shelter hundreds of ships, yet remained too shallow for the larger vessels of the Royal Navy. It soon became a lawless refuge, populated by pirates, smugglers, and traders, an outlaw's paradise. Among those drawn to this haven was Edward Teach, likely arriving from Jamaica shortly after the Treaty of Utrecht, which ended the War of the Spanish Succession. Teach, like many former privateers, were now out of work and would turn to piracy. In around the year 1716, he joined the crew of the veteran pirate Benjamin Hornigold, who eventually entrusted him with the command of a captured vessel. A year later, in the year 1717, the two captains sailed independently, raiding ships laden with flour, wine, and other valuable cargo along the Atlantic coast. Teach's rise was first noted in this period. The anti-piracy patrol reported him commanding a ship with 6 guns and a crew of 70. That September, Teach and Hornigold encountered Stede Bonnet, a gentleman-turned-pirate, whose crew had grown disillusioned. Bonnet allowed Blackbeard to take command of his ship, named Revenge. Not long after, Hornigold accepted the king's pardon and retired, choosing comfort over infamy. Blackbeard, however, had no such desire for peace, and the two men parted ways, never to see each other again. Now commanding 2 ships, Blackbeard struck again. On the 28th of November in the year 1717, off the coast of St. Vincent, he and his crew attacked a large French merchant vessel. After an intense exchange of cannon fire, Blackbeard's superior firepower overwhelmed the enemy, killing several of its crew and forcing surrender. The captured ship was La Concorde, a French slave vessel. Blackbeard would claim her and outfitted her with 40 guns and renamed her Queen Anne's Revenge. This formidable warship became his personal flagship. With Queen Anne's Revenge at his command, Blackbeard quickly earned a fearsome reputation. His name struck terror across the Caribbean and both sides of the Atlantic, cementing his legacy as one of the most notorious pirates in history. In late November of the year 1717, near the waters off St. Vincent, Blackbeard captured a ship named the Great Allen, a large and heavily armed merchant vessel. Following a fierce engagement, he compelled the ship's surrender, brought her closer to shore, removed her crew and cargo, and then without mercy, set her ablaze and sank her. News of this brazen act spread swiftly, reported in the Boston newsletter, further fueling Blackbeard's growing infamy. By this time, he likely commanded around 150 men across 3 vessels. On December the 5th, he seized another ship. This one was called the Margaret, which he took near Crab Island. Her captain, Henry Bostock, and his crew were detained aboard Queen Anne's Revenge for approximately 8 hours, during which the Margaret was thoroughly plundered. The captives were ultimately released unharmed. Upon reaching St. Christopher's Island, Bostock formally reported the incident to Governor Walter Hamilton and submitted a sworn affidavit. In his deposition, Bostock described Blackbeard as the commander of multiple ships, one of which reportedly carried gold dust, silver plate, and a fine drinking cup taken from the captain of the Great Allen. He further claimed that Blackbeard's men boasted about destroying other vessels. Though Blackbeard questioned Bostock about local shipping routes, he showed no surprise when informed of an impending royal pardon for pirates. It's likely that Blackbeard was already aware of the offer, but chose instead to continue his lawless life at sea, sowing terror and chaos. Bostock's account also provided a physical description of Blackbeard, noting him as tall, with a very black and long beard, a detail that gave rise to the infamous name Blackbeard. Later descriptions add that he braided his thick beard into pigtails, sometimes adorning them with coloured ribbons. In the year 1724, the author Charles Johnson portrayed Teach as resembling a fury from hell, a vision so dreadful that no imagination could conceive anything more terrifying. Whether embellished or not, the depiction suggests Teach understood the strategic power of appearance. For him, fear was often more effective than force. Physically imposing, Teach was broad-shouldered and dressed in dark garments, knee-high boots, and often wore a wide-brimmed hat. On occasion, he added a vivid coat of silk or velvet. In combat, he wore a sling across his chest, carrying 6 pistols, and tucked slow-burning fuses under his hat, creating an aura of smoke and fire that amplified his fearsome image. Blackbeard also flew a uniquely menacing flag. On a black field stood on a white-horned skeleton. One hand held a spear pointing towards a red heart, from which blood dripped. The other raised a glass in a devilish toast. The symbolism was clear. Death awaited any who resisted. The flag was intended to compel surrender through sheer terror, and likely succeeded many times. In March of the year 1718, While resupplying with fresh water off the coast of Belize, Blackbeard's ships spotted the Jamaican sloop used for logwood cutting, named the Adventure, which was approaching the harbour. The vessel was stopped, and her captain, Harriet, was invited to join the pirate fleet. He and his crew agreed, and Blackbeard was now one of the most formidable pirates who sailed the seas. By May of the year 1718, Blackbeard had reached the height of his power, commanding a fleet of ships. That month, he launched a daring blockade of Charlestown in South Carolina. With no naval defense in place, the first prize was the town's own pilot boat. Over the following 5 or 6 days, Blackbeard's fleet captured and looted approximately 9 vessels, attempting to enter or leave the harbour. Among them was the Crowley, bound for London and carrying several prominent passengers, including Samuel Wragg, a member of the Carolina Council. The captives were imprisoned below deck and informed that unless the colony provided medical supplies, all hostages would be executed, their heads delivered to the governor, and their ships set ablaze. The colony complied, securing the requested supplies. True to his word, though not without stripping the vessels of all their valuables, Blackbeard released the prisoners and allowed their ships to depart. By the middle of the year 1718, perhaps weary of the pirate's life, or more likely intent on safeguarding his growing fortune, Blackbeard devised a calculated scheme. On the 13th of June, he deliberately ran Queen Anne's Revenge and one of his sloops aground along the coast of North Carolina. After transferring his plunder to the remaining vessel named Adventure, he marooned a large portion of his crew on a nearby island, still within sight of the shore. When the pirate Stede Bonnet returned from a failed attempt to obtain a royal pardon, he found the fleet abandoned and the treasure vanished. Gathering the stranded men, he set off in pursuit of Blackbeard, but his efforts came to nothing. The pirate had vanished into the coastal shadows. Elsewhere, Blackbeard and a selected group of around 30 men sought clemency from Governor Charles Eden of North Carolina. Privately, however, the two struck a secret bargain. With Eden's assistance, Blackbeard secured a pardon and had Adventure registered as a lawful war prize, lending a fragile facade of legitimacy to his operations. He would resume his raids on passing ships, now cloaked in the pretense of legality. In the nearby town of Bath, legend holds that Blackbeard married a local woman and even started a family. His crew brought with them a steady stream of illicit goods, gold and manpower, making them both indispensable and deeply feared by the townsfolk. Frustrated and unable to act, the local merchants turned to Virginia's governor, Alexander Spotswood, a political rival and outspoken critic of Governor Eden. Spotswood seized upon this opportunity, and under his orders, a force of 57 men were drawn from 2 Royal Navy warships and placed under the command of Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Equipped with 2 fast vessels, the Ranger and the Jane Maynard, they set sail in November, determined to rid the coast of the dreaded pirate once and for all. On the evening of November the 21st in the year 1718, Lieutenant Robert Maynard located Blackbeard anchored behind Ocracoke Island. Unfamiliar with these treacherous waters, he waited until dawn to attack, sealing off the inlet to prevent any warning. Meanwhile, Blackbeard, hosting guests and without a lookout, remained unaware. At daybreak, Maynard's ships, Jane and the Ranger, approached cautiously. A small boat scouting the channel was fired upon by Blackbeard's ship, the Adventure, prompting him to cut anchor and ready for battle. The ship Adventure turned her guns towards the attackers, delivering a devastating broadside, crippling the ship Ranger and killing her captain Hyde, and it also inflicted heavy losses on the ship named Jane. Despite the damage, Maynard's trap was set. He had hidden most of his men below deck, and as Blackbeard boarded the seemingly empty ship, Maynard's crew burst from hiding, catching the pirates off guard. A brutal melee ensued. Blackbeard and Maynard fired at each other. Maynard struck his mark, while Blackbeard missed. Although wounded, Blackbeard carried on fighting, and the two captains would fight in a duel-style melee, with both men drawing their swords. Eventually, Blackbeard shattered Maynard's blade in the ensuing chaos, but just as he prepared to strike a fatal blow, one of Maynard's men slashed at Blackbeard's neck. The wounded pirate was then quickly overwhelmed and was killed by Maynard's crew. At his death, Blackbeard's body bore 5 gunshot wounds and around 20 slashes. Upon seeing the legendary Blackbeard had fallen, his crew surrendered. Blackbeard's head was placed on a pole at the entrance of Chesapeake Bay as a warning to other pirates and a greeting to other ships, and it stood there for several years, rotting. Blackbeard's legacy has endured through the centuries, becoming a staple figure in films, books, myths, and legends. Folklore adds to this mystique, with tales of buried treasure and ghostly sightings along the Carolina coast. Through these mediums, Blackbeard has transformed from a historical pirate into a cultural symbol of piracy itself. I would like to give a huge thank you to all of my members. Your contribution is valuable to the continuation of the channel, and I appreciate you all immensely. A special thank you to John Sides. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and I'll see you all next week for another History Profile.